The other day, my wife Laura and I attended a program, a fundraiser for the UJA. It was really a wonderful evening. I saw some of you there that night. They had two performers that each did a set, and then afterwards they interviewed them and they talked to them. One was Nissim Black. He's an Orthodox Black Jewish rapper. He converted. He moved from Seattle to Israel. It was really a very interesting story. And the other was someone who's gone viral a few times in Jewish circles and is now becoming even more and more of in his own right in the secular world as well, as a comedian named Modi. You may have heard of him. And one of the shticks that he did at the programs, he talked about Shiva. And as a rabbi, I've attended enough Shivas in my day that I've certainly seen what he is talking about. And he said that one of the things that bothers him at Shiva is people often ask what he called, he's saying it, not me, dumb questions. Right? How did she die? He says is the question he hears all the time. And his response was, talking about, a bubby, right? She's 101, right? It was a scuba diving accident. Right? Her friend, went up to get air to come back down. By the time she got back down to, get her, she was stuck under the vessel. Her friend got back down and, Bubby was gone, sorry. Or no, she was running with the bulls, right? She was skydiving, right? He picked all these ridiculous things. Because he's right, it's a question that sometimes feels a little silly to ask. And I've certainly seen at Shivas before people ask questions that probably aren't the best questions, or say things that probably aren't the best things to say. But overall, I actually think Shiva is an incredible thing we have. And I think most families are incredibly comforted by the people that come into their homes, by the people that come to listen to the stories of their loved one, people who come and they bring food, and they ask, what can we do? And they bring so much food that you have more food than you know what to do with. The truth is, it's chesed, it's kindness. And that's something that we as Jews are really good about in our communities. We're really good at chesed. Support. Standing with each other. And it goes all the way back to stories in the Torah, all the way back to halakha, to Jewish law and the Gemara and the Talmud. We're commanded that when you build a Jewish community, there are certain things that it needs to have, and one of them is a charity committee. One of them is a charity pot. Funds that are created by the community to help those in need. Jews are very good at supporting each other, at being a community. We see it all the time. Somebody gives birth. We put together a meal train to help them. They have older siblings. We figure out a carpool system to help them get the kids to school, get them to where they need to be, the older ones. Someone's admitted to the hospital. What do? We call, we send care packages, we visit them. I can tell you from personal experience, when my wife broke her leg a couple of years ago, it was even in the middle of COVID, but we were getting platters to our house for just the two of us at the time that would have fed a shul on a Saturday morning. People reach out because they care. Jews take care of each other. We're a community. And I can tell you, I see it all the time. Sometimes people say things that they shouldn't say. Sometimes people ask a question that maybe could have gone unasked. But overall, we know very well what to do, how to handle it. When somebody breaks a bone or has a physical issue, we know what to do. If someone were to have a cardiac issue and be in the hospital, a few weeks later when they return to synagogue, everyone says, it's so great to see you. How are you feeling? Is there anything you need? Refuah shlema? They reach out. It happens with physical illness. Things that we can see, things that we can wrap our head around. There's an area of chesed we've not gotten very good at. We need room for improvement. If someone has a mental health crisis, they're admitted to the hospital or they seek treatment, and word gets out, and it spreads around a synagogue or a community. When we see them next week, we don't know what to say. Oftentimes we don't know what to do. People look from across the room without saying hello. When someone makes eye contact with them, they break it. We look awkwardly at our feet. When we talk to them, if we do get kind of next to them in Kiddush or something in line accidentally, Because we don't know what to say, we try to avoid them. We avoid the topic entirely. We change the topic when it comes up. We add a sense of shame to it, as if it's something that shouldn't be discussed, because it makes us uncomfortable. And one of the things where stigma around mental illness really hurts and does damage is in the Jewish community, particularly because we are so good at chesed. We're so good at reaching out when it's something physical. It makes it hurt that much more when we don't offer support for people who look to their community for support when it's an illness that we can't see. And there's a lot of these illnesses out there. Sometimes we imagine it happens in other communities or to other people, but the truth is, it happens everywhere. Eating disorders, anxiety, depression, and more. According to the Mental Health Commission of Canada, 1 in 5 people experience a mental health problem or illness each year. 1 in 5. By age 40, they say half of us will have had a mental health concern of some sort. Nearly twice as many as people with heart disease, and twice as much as people with type 2 diabetes. Despite how prevalent it is, from this study from the Mental Health Commission of Canada, they said about 40% of parents say they wouldn't tell anyone, including the family doctor, if their child has experienced a mental health problem. 40%. 60% of people with a mental health problem or illness won't seek help out of fear of being labeled because of the stigma. I'm not going to say I know what it's like to live with depression or severe anxiety or an eating disorder. But back in high school, I was diagnosed with ADD. And I remember thinking, what's wrong with me? Why is it that other kids can just sit there and focus and find the strength inside? Why do I have to take this drug, this medication? What's flawed in me? Why is something in me broken and not in them? I remember really wanting my siblings not to know, my friends not to know. I remember thinking, why is my brain flawed? And I took the medication when I was in high school and university, and for years I didn't want anybody to know. I remember a few years ago when I told my sister back in high school I was taking Ritalin. Her response to me was that it wasn't news. She knew. We were living in the same house. How could she not have known? Right? It was really silly of me to imagine that my siblings wouldn't know what was going on when every day at breakfast I had this pill that I took, right? And they didn't. But what was even sillier of me was to imagine that my siblings knowing would somehow make a difference in our relationship. Was to imagine that the two people that for my entire life I've been closest to would judge me or think differently of me. They wouldn't just love and support me as they always have done. But stigma is powerful. I can only imagine what it's like for people with other issues to come forward and to say, this is my problem. This is what I have. A Canadian study from a few years ago found that 75% of people would not want to disclose a mental illness to a coworker or employer because of stigma. Interestingly, that same survey found as I found. 76% of people said they'd be completely comfortable and supportive of a coworker with mental illness. Most people don't care. Most people want to help. Most people wouldn't think about us differently. But yet the stigma is there. There's a story in the Talmud. The rabbis are trying to address the question of suffering. Where does it come from? And there's a story about Rabbi Chia bar Abba who falls ill. Another rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan, goes to visit him and says to him, do you want this suffering? Is it dear to you? Do you enjoy this? The answer is he doesn't like it. So Rabbi Yochanan says to him, give me your hand, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, give me your hand. And Rabbi Yochanan lifts him up and restores him to health, the story goes. Later on, Rabbi Yochanan falls ill, the Talmud tells us, and Rabbi Hanina went to go visit him. Rabbi Hanina said the same thing to you. Is your suffering dear to you? Do you want this suffering? Rabbi Yochanan says, no. Rabbi Hanina says, give me your hand. Rabbi Yochanan gives him his hand. Rabbi Hanina lifts him up and restores him to health, the Talmud tells us. The rabbis then ask the question, if Rabbi Yochanan had this power, if he could lift up Rabbi Hanina bar Abba, lift him to health, why didn't Rabbi Yochanan lift himself up to health when he was ill, when he needed it? The answer the rabbis tell us, Ein chavush matir atzmo mi beit ha'asurim. A prisoner cannot free themselves from a prison. Often we can't lift ourselves out. We need someone else to give us a hand. In our increasingly isolated world, despite all the connectedness we face because of modern technology, we're more and more distant, we're more and more isolated, we're more and more impersonal and broken apart. We need each other to lift us up. And the opportunities to lift someone up and to pull them out of something when they need you is fewer and fewer. We don't have those personal encounters. We need connection. Look around you. Look at the people in your life and ask yourself, what could you do to help them? What do they need? If you don't know what they need, ask them. We need to start cultivating a habit of this, of being a community, being connected to each other. A culture and a habit of caring and giving to the people in our lives. Because oftentimes, we can't give ourselves what we need. We need someone else to give us a hand and to pull us out, to help us, to give it to us. There's another story in the Talmud I wanted to share. They're discussing, the rabbis, a verse from the Torah, from the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy. You shall grope at noon as the blind person gropes in the darkness. Rabbi Yossi says, why does a blind person care whether it's light or dark? Why does the verse specify at noon? Like a blind person gropes in the darkness? Blind person gropes the same in daylight, don't they? They can't see. Then Rabbi Yossi says, I was pondering this verse and I couldn't figure out what it meant until one night, in the absolute darkest night there was, I was walking in the woods and I saw a blind man walking towards me with a torch. And I said to him, why are you carrying a torch? You can't see. Why do you need this? And the man replied, as long as I have a torch in my hand, people see me and they save me from the pits and the thorns and the thistles. Sometimes we need help. We all do. Every life has moments of difficulty, some more than others. But everyone at some point needs help. Everyone at some point needs someone else to lift them up. But too often we don't know that someone in our life needs help unless they're willing to ask for it. We have to be brave enough, like that man, to hold that torch up, to wave it in the air and to say, I need something, so that those around us can help us. The blind man held the torch so that those who could see would see if he was in danger, if he was going to fall into a pit or wander into a thorn bush, if he was going to fall off the path. We have to hold the torch up so that others know when we need help. But again, there is stigma. It's difficult to say I need help. It's difficult to say to someone, I need you to lift me out. I can't lift myself out. I can't help myself. And that's where, as a community, we need to be there for those who need it. We need to be there in a way that makes people feel safe, raising their hand and saying, I need something. We need to be there for them, to create a space that is comfortable for people to admit when they need something. We need to cultivate a culture of care. I remember speaking to someone once who suffered from an eating disorder about Yom Kippur. It's a question you can imagine. Should they fast or not? The answer was easy. Their health, their wellness comes first. They shouldn't fast if it's going to set off their illness. But then they came to me after the holiday and they told me what it felt like. Sneaking food, sitting in the bathroom of the synagogue eating a granola bar, drinking water, hiding it. Getting scolded when someone saw them eating, that they shouldn't do that in public where people can see them. It's It's a difficult moment for them. If we saw someone elderly eating or drinking on Yom Kippur, we make the assumption that they're doing it because they need to. But someone young, seemingly fit, we assume they're just being lazy and they don't want to fast. Not that there's a reason behind it. Because it's an illness we can't see. We have to create a culture where people don't face that stigma. People know they can come forward. For a long time, all I knew really about OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, was from the show Monk. My wife, works as a social worker and works as a therapist for people with severe OCD. And I've learned more and more about the disease. Certainly no expert. But it had me rethink a conversation I had had years ago with a student that was converting to Judaism, and the rules that I gave them for when they go to the mikveh, how to prepare their body, to make sure that there's no barrier between them and the water. The rules one needs to observe when they go to a mikveh. And at the time when I sent this to them, I didn't realize that they suffered from this illness. This was someone that was my student for over a year. We met regularly. We talked about all sorts of very personal things going on in their life. But this topic, something that deeply affected them, never came up. Because I failed in my own job to create a space where they felt comfortable sharing that with me, sharing their illness. And the result was what should have been an incredible, meaningful, and powerful moment at the end of a year-long journey of learning about Judaism was a very difficult and traumatizing moment with the rules of the mikveh. I wasn't prepared then for those conversations, but I've gotten better. The process is slow. Real, lasting change almost always is. In the Mishnah for Yoma about Yom Kippur and the sacrifice, it tells us the high priest would take the blood from the sacrifice and would sprinkle it on the altar, 7 drops. But he didn't count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It was slow and meticulous. 1, 1 and 1, 1 and 2, 1 and 3. It's a lesson we can take from this. It's a reminder that change is incremental. That every journey, every task begins one single step at a time. It's a slow pace sometimes, change and growth. We shouldn't be hard on ourselves if we don't see the results immediately. But we should focus on where we began. The first step and the step we're on. And look at the progress day by day and celebrate it, the direction we're heading. Challenges that people face don't disappear overnight. But if we seek help we need, if we don't rush, if we take seriously the work that needs to be done, if we walk the path step by step, people make progress. And as a community, becoming a place where people feel comfortable sharing, becoming a place where people feel comfortable raising their hand and saying, I need help, doesn't happen overnight, but step by step. It's a long journey, but it's an incredibly important one. The isolation, the anxiety, the depression, and more after COVID is just increased. In particular, this holiday we talk about writing ourselves in the book of life. We plead with God, we ask God to write us in the book of life for the year to come during these 10 days of repentance. Every year, 4,500 people in Canada die by suicide. 12 people every day. More than 200 people in Canada attempt suicide every single day. 200 people who decide that they don't deserve to be written in the book of life for the year to come. The travesty that in our society and our world that happens. That they don't have the places to go, the resources, that they don't know that they can raise their hand and say when they need help. That's why we need to walk this journey. Nobody should think that they don't deserve to be written in the book of life. And the way we make those changes is by getting the basic tools that we need to help people. Most people have taken a basic first aid class sometime in their life. What about a class of how to talk to somebody who's facing a mental crisis? A class of what do you say or don't say? Just a simple session in an afternoon or an evening on how to be someone supportive if someone comes to you and says, I need help. A class on how to create spaces for people to ask for help, to know how to respond. We have to change our culture. 200 people a day. 200 people a day. So by this year, we're going to be focusing on mental wellness as a part of Beth Torah's legacy. We're going to be offering a series of programs, from simple, basic ones and general ones, on how to talk to somebody or how to support a family member in need, to specific ones addressing various issues, mental wellness issues that face those that are older, or issues for parents, how to deal with a teenager with anxiety, how to deal with anxiety in your own lives. We're going to have a series of programs and classes and events and opportunities. And I encourage everyone to be involved. So we can make a difference, but it's twofold. We have to create a space where people feel comfortable raising their hand and holding that torch and saying, I need help. And we have to remember that what's our neighbor's problem is ours. Because we can't pull ourselves out of something. We need to extend our hand and be there for each other. We get that in so many ways as a Jewish community. We get chesed. We're great at it. That's why in this area, this year, we're going to do the work to improve and be great at it too. So that everyone in our community knows there's a place for them. Shana Tova.